Perfect. All right, go right ahead, Austin.
All right, the subject of this presentation is a comparison of Fluopyram or vellum total and Aldicarb, which is the old Temic and now Agalogic for root knot, nematode, and disease control, along with the yield response of peanut. And this study covers the period from 2013 to 2020. Root knot's always been a major issue on peanut in Alabama as well as surrounding state. Has to do primarily with the rotation patterns that a lot of growers have followed, at least in the past. Either continuous peanuts or a 1 year out rotation is usually conducive to the buildup of juvenile populations or root knot populations up to the point that they do impact the yield of peanuts, and then at that point in time, some type of control response is required. Now, rotation, of course, is the most effective, but for economic reasons, growers don't always have the opportunity to rotate or separate peanut crops over a longer period of time as they would need to manage this nematode properly. At least in Alabama, when the quota system was eliminated and acreage spread out over a much larger area, that development actually reduced the impact and the occurrence of severe root knot problems in Alabama, simply because the acreage was spread over such a large area, and a lot of the newer acreage was new to peanuts, so there little, if any, root knot present in those fields. And actually that trend has continued to this day. In Southwest Alabama, we really never have run into a serious root knot problem in a producer field. Of course, we still have issues, particularly in, say, Henry, Houston, and Geneva County, where growers may grow peanuts in a 1 year out rotation. This study was done at the Wiregrass Research and Extension Center, so it's down in Henry County. The area utilized was the same tier over the 7 year period. The rotations differed somewhat in that in 2 years we had peanuts behind peanuts for this trial, but in the other 4 years where data is reported, the prior crop was either cotton or in 1 year sun hemp. So the data from each of the years was pooled and analyzed as a factorial with yield as a whole plot and nematicide as a split plot treatment. And our nematicide treatments were vellum total, which is Fluopyram plus imidacloprid, an insecticide that has no nematicidal activity but is in there for thrips control. We had Agalogic Aldicarb, or just Aldicarb. And early in this study, the formulation was actually Temic, but the rate that's used is the same over the whole period, the whole time period. And then the final treatment was vellum total, followed by Propulse mid-season. So basically, you're making 2 applications of Fluopyram across during the production season. The Propulse has it's quite a good fungicide, has pretty fair activity against both leaf spot diseases and some against stem rot or white mold. It's usually applied at pegging time and then watered in just simply to get the material off the foliage and down into the ground. And that was done in all of these studies. Once the Propulse was applied, the irrigation system was run over the area, put out about a ½ an inch of water to wash that product from the foliage into the ground. Now, in addition to these treatments, there was also a premium leaf spot and stem rot control program in place. So it's primarily 2 to 4 applications of either Provost or Provost Silver in combination with 3 applications of a chlorothalonil fungicide, or in some cases, there were some other products put in. And the study was irrigated as needed. This slide just illustrates the various action dates over the study period. Don't have any data for 2019, but we got planting dates. Early on in the studies, we were in early June, typically late May. Then the planting dates were moved up. Plant vigor was rated usually earlier in the season. The propulse application dates are listed again sometime at pegging time. Leaf spot was typically rated about 2 to maybe 7 days prior to plot inversion, which is when stem rot damage was assessed, as was any damage to the pegs and pods. And so that basically follows through with how that was handled. Just to start off on data, we have the table 2 is the F values for the generalized linear models for effect on yield and nematicide treatment on the measured variables. And here it's basically just seeing if we have a significant yield by nematicide interaction, that means the ranking of the treatments varied by study year. If we did not have a significant interaction term, then you know that the impact of those nematicide treatments on those variables was consistent over the 6-year study period. So there really wasn't any differential over time over the study years. And the variables were plant vigor. We had looked at leaf spot disease, stem rot, root knot damage, juvenile counts, and then on to pod yields. And year had a significant impact on all the variables except plant vigor. And then the nematicide had an effect on all the variables except for root knot juvenile populations, which is not a particular surprise since those counts oftentimes don't relate particularly well to what you might see as far as yield response. Table 3 just summarizes the years. The previous crop gives you an idea of the overall root knot damage across years, and it did vary from year to year, even though we were in the same general tier. The highest amount of damage was behind peanuts, but the second time we hit peanuts, basically the damage levels were similar to those we obtained with the 1-year out cotton rotations, any of those, as well as the sun hemp. Root knot juvenile populations varied by year, tended towards more in the peanuts, the continuous peanut rotations, but not necessarily, and tended to be less where we had the 1-year out cotton rotations and also the sun hemp. And then just the average yield across all the treatments is listed in the final column. And again, there are some differences over years. So really the meat of the study, these are our nematicide treatments. We had the Aldicarb, AgLogic, the Velum Total Fluopyram, and then the Velum Total followed by the Propulse. And the Velum Total by Propulse would be a premium treatment in a field where you would have the greatest root knot pressure and also a very high yield potential because it's going to be a costly treatment. The one treatment that reduced root knot damage over the 6-year study period was AgLogic Aldicarb Chemic. The damage levels on the Fluopyram treatments were identical to those that we saw with the no-nematicide control. It seems like a bit of a surprise when you look on the right-hand corner, you see the yield response. Basically, we got the same yield gains with Aldicarb Fluopyram and a little bit of an uptick numerically with when we added the Propulse at pegging time. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, there were no differences in juvenile counts across the treatments. But that's, again, a situation where you might find that the nematicides improve the condition of the root system earlier in the season. And then when you go out at the end of the summer, you take final samples, the populations have recovered. But earlier in the season, when the damage to the root and to the pegs and pods really makes a difference, those numbers were lower. And the net result was the yields are significantly greater with all the treatments that we looked at. There were some impacts of the treatments on plant vigor. Tended, but not all the time, saw higher or better plant vigor with the Velum Total as compared with the no-nematicide control. There wasn't really any improvement with when we added the Propulse on top of the Velum Total. So the The plants generally looked as good as they were going to get with just the vellum total. There were some situations also where there was an improvement in vigor ratings with the AgLogic, but not as consistently as was seen with the vellum total. So the vellum total did a little better there. Leaf spot defoliation, related defoliation, wasn't particularly high. Again, we had what could be or would be considered a premium leaf spot program in place. Generally speaking, the level of defoliation across all the treatments was very low. There were some situations like in 2013 with the vellum total plus propulse where there was some leaf spot activity. A reduction was obtained with that treatment, but it's unlikely that we would necessarily have seen a yield response with leaf spot levels in this particular area. And there were some other situations where there were lower defoliation levels by a few percentage points with the vellum total as compared with nematicide control or no nematicide control, or with the vellum plus propulse. And and generally speaking, there weren't any real differences with the AgLogic, which is kind of what you'd expect to see. Kind of the same situation with stem rot. With a good program, you don't expect to see a lot of stem rot activity, and that's generally the situation here. There were some differences by study year. Again, with the propulse, in some of the years, we did get a reduction, but it was not particularly consistent, due mainly to the fact that we didn't have a great deal of white mold or stem rot pressure. And so essentially, at least in this situation, where you had a premium fungicide program in place, having the vellum total or even adding the propulse on top of that's probably not going to greatly appreciate the level of control of stem rot that you might see. So all in all, with all married variables differed by study year, with previous crop influencing disease and nematode activity along with yield, we had some movement towards having lower yields with peanuts behind peanuts and a little better with peanuts crop behind cotton. And that's pretty consistent with, of course, what we've seen in production fields and in some of the rotational studies that have been conducted at the Wiregrass Research Center. We did get a reduction in damage to the roots and pods with the AgLogic. Didn't see it with vellum total alone or in combination with propulse, but in essence, we did get a good vigor response with both of those products. And as well, also saw a nice yield response, equally effective with all three of those treatments, with a slight numerical edge to having the propulse added to the vellum total program as compared with vellum total. The yield response was about 350 pounds per acre consistently over 6 studies over the study period as compared with the no nematicide control. So it looks like, both of the products are equally effective right now. If you look at the cost in the marketplace, the vellum total is far less costly than the AgLogic. Most of our growers actually have the spray equipment on the planters necessary to apply vellum total and furrow. They've been doing it with Abound and some other products, also with some insecticides like Admire Pro. So they're already set up to put vellum total out. And when you consider the lower cost per acre, it is at about half the price. It certainly is the preferred treatment at this point in time for managing root knot in peanuts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Austin. I had one quick question for you. Which species of nematode did you have? And I guess a follow-up, how many folks in your area are actually using, say, vellum total or AgLogic on a farmer scale?
It was Meloidogyne arenaria race 2. So it's our peanut root knot nematode is our standard root knot down here. We do not have northern root knot nematode to speak of. So it's the one we deal with. You know, I don't have any specific numbers, but the cost, I think, of vellum total is somewhere in the $32 an acre range, maybe somewhere down in there. You're looking at Ag Logic being in the 45 or more dollar an acre range. So when you start talking those types of differences, the other thing I was going to mention is actually a lot of growers don't have boxes on their planters anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of takes the Ag Logic out of the equation, because it has to be put in furrow and it has to be incorporated to make sure there's no granules on the soil surface as per application instructions. And we don't have that type of an issue with vellum total, simply because the Fluopyram is it's a fungicide and it's relatively non-toxic, and certainly compared to Aldicarb it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks a lot. Good to see you today. Thanks for your information.